I have about 25 years experience in architecture, and most of it has been focused on sustainable leadership. So here at Jacobs, I'm in Irvine, California, right now, and this is where I'm based at. I'm basically the national director for sustainable design. And what that means is Jacobs is a 70,000 person global firm. Within that, there are about 2,800 architects and engineers that I help with sustainable projects, and including third-party rating systems such as United States Green Building Council. So I'm really passionate about the integrated design process, which I'll talk to you a little bit about today. And in essence, the integrated design process is really about getting to know and getting along with other disciplines in your field. So I'm also a lead AP with a specialty for BD plus C, and also a sustainable building advisor. So with that, part of my interest is to know who we have on the call today, because I've visited some of your countries. So I would like to know if you could put in the chat while I'm talking which countries you're representing, which countries you're in, and then after the presentation, I'll take questions and we'll take a roll call as to which countries are on the line. So it'll be fun. So we're going to go through a transition to another computer, and I'll begin the presentation here shortly. So stay tuned. So the presentation I'm going to give today is entitled Net Zero Energy Design, Advancing Concepts to Reality. So I'm going to jump into a term which is net zero, and it's a term that's used in the US and also around the world to describe a energy definition, and I'll get into that now. What you're looking at is a white paper from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado. And so I'm going to go over a few definitions on how they describe net zero. So the first definition of net zero is one that is actually used most commonly, and that's net zero site energy. And essentially, the definition is a site zero energy building produces at least as much energy as it uses in a year in a given quarter. So let me just describe to you that when a building has renewable energy on it, it means that that building is producing renewable energy as much as it is consuming. And the boundary in this case is at the site. The next definition is source energy. I won't go into the full definition, but basically they calculate energy all the way back to the source. The next one is related to energy costs, and the last one is related to emissions. So for the purpose of this presentation, we're really going to focus on net zero site energy, and just realize that there are at least 4 different definitions here. So when people in your industry speak about net zero, you can qualify that net zero and ask them, which definition are you using in reference to energy? So why are we concerned with net zero energy or energy efficiency in general? Throughout the nation and throughout the world, it's really about these 6 bullet points. One of them is energy security. So, we do a lot of work with the government and the military, and their biggest concern is really having the security of energy in case of a crisis, right? So they want to be self-sufficient. The next one is resource conservation. So as you know, we only have so many fixed resources in the world, and we need to conserve those. We also need to reduce operating costs for our facilities and also mitigate climate change, as well as to mitigate the local impact to the environment, and then also hedge against future price volatility. So these are our kind of main impetuses for energy conservation and net zero energy. So in the US, President Obama signed Executive Order 13514, and in that, in 2009, Section 2GI says, quote, beginning in the year 2020 and thereafter, ensuring that all new federal buildings that enter the planning process are designed to achieve zero net energy by 2030. So we have a big commitment in the US, and this is one of the commitments that was made through this executive order. Another aspect of the federal mandates and executive orders is the Energy Independent and Security Act, or ESA 2007. And within that, again, you can see a net zero energy commercial building initiative for commercial buildings that are newly constructed in the US by 2030, and then 50% building stock by 2040. In all commercial buildings in the United States by 2050. So again, these are embedded in the US executive orders and federal mandates. I mentioned integrated design earlier, and this is one of my favorite slides because it really shows how it's so important for all of us to really collaborate and coordinate. And this is why I get so excited about working on projects where we have the building owner, we have a landscape architect, interior designer. So it's really about having a number of people come together for a common goal. And often in projects, what I do is I actually help facilitate what's called a sustainability workshop, or charrette. And that's basically where experts come together to discuss certain goals, like energy efficiency, very early in the project. So integrated design, again, is all about getting the discipline out of their silo and having them communicate with other disciplines in order to create innovation and goals. So this is a little bit of a timeline for an energy efficient sustainable project, and it gives you an idea when some of these tools and feasibility studies and modeling actually happen on a project. So as I mentioned, sustainability and energy efficiency really can be the most cost effective very early in a design process. So the earlier you get together and start discussing the goals, the more opportunities you have, and the costs are the least at this time. So the blue pre-design is really where this discussion should start. So this is where you can actually start orientating the building. You can register your project if it's going for a third-party grading system, and you can actually do an initial feasibility status. The next phase, you would actually invite the integrated design team and your subject matter experts. You can talk about the goals that the owner wants to achieve. So it can be a net zero building, it can be a LEED certified building, it can be a sustainable master plan or infrastructure. So whatever that goal is, that meeting actually happens at the charrette, and those goals are vetted at that time. So the next phase, basically you would put that project out to bid, and then you would also then have another meeting with the contractor and discuss the goals with them at that time. Closeout and occupancy, again, the goals actually don't end at this time. It actually goes all the way into facility management. So that team of experts is with your process throughout this whole timeline. So the beauty of having that team stay together is that they actually build on those relationships and the resources and expertise throughout the whole timeline. So I mentioned the eco-charrette process. This is actually a charrette that Jacobs conducted. And you can see on the left, we call these snow cards. And these are actually put up on the wall where we actually memorialize goals and expectations that are developed at the charrette. And this is really important to establish the goals very early in design. So one of the projects where I was able to use this on is in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and this was an energy reduction pilot project for the Army. And it was targeted to be not only net zero, but also LEED Platinum as a facility. The facility itself is about 32,000 square feet. Vehicle maintenance shop about 4, unheated storage about 1, so a total of about 38,000 square feet. So these are the 3 main goals. Going into this, they wanted to determine the impacts of cost and effort of achieving the next level of energy reduction, and then develop new requirements and processes for energy reduction, similar to the eco-charrette, and investigate LEED Platinum rating, and then also investigate renewable energy opportunities. So you're looking at a floor plan, kind of a preliminary floor plan of this actual training facility. We also did early daylight studies as well. So as you can see, we actually found that one of our buildings on this courtyard scheme was lacking in daylighting, so we actually added some solar tubes to that building so they could get more daylight. So this is a really good study to perform very early in design. We also did external daylight studies so we can kind of see how that building would be receiving daylight and natural light from the outside. We incorporated solar hot water on the project, and again, those daylight studies helped us place that solar hot water panels on the roof. And back to ESA 2007, the government is required to have a 30% domestic water demand met by solar hot water. We were exploring the use of a very interesting in product called rammed earth, and this is essentially a system, a building system where you're using earth from the site and adding about 10% of cement and actually ramming this earth in formwork and then building it up over time. On the left is an idea of kind of a section through a wall with rebar and insulation, and on the right is a finished product. Now, we also did an energy model very early, and that really helped us determine what our demands were going to be for the facility and where we had to provide additional expertise in regards to building systems. So this energy model was actually broken down into building systems, and this gave us a really good idea of where we stood. As far as photovoltaics, we determined, again, through energy model, what our demand would be, and that's how we sized the photovoltaic system. So we ended up with a 184 kW PV system, and we decided to do a solar canopy that can be used also as solar shading for cars. So this was a canopy of PV panels that also served as a canopy for automobiles. There were some incentives. There was a 30% federal tax credit, and then there were some financial options. So we gave different options to the client. They could either purchase this out direct, or they could go through a power purchase agreement, or what's called a PPA, where a third party actually purchases the solar and lease it back to the client. So there's some different options as far as purchasing. So this is a picture of a representative solar canopy. These are typically about 9 feet high. And again, they have adequate space for 184 kW. Again, that shading serves the purpose of warding against the heat island effect as well. So this is an overall bird's eye perspective of the Las Cruces, New Mexico Netzero project. And this serves again as one case study for where we put this into play. This is a picture of the courtyard and facade. So the next project, this one actually is built currently, and this is again for the military. This is the Los Alamitos Army Reserve Center. It's only about 30 minutes from Irvine, from where we are today. So this project was pursuing LEED 2.2 gold rating under a campus approach, and they had the goal of net zero energy. In this case, they were using a 375 kW solar array. Again, they're using a car canopy, which will provide about 17 to 18 year payback period. This is a section, an earlier drawing of that car canopy. And this is actually the car canopy as it's built today. So what you're looking at is the underside of the car canopy. You can see the photovoltaic cells, how sun is coming through. This is actually my car below, and the license plate actually reads compressed natural gas vehicle. So this is actually an alternative fuel vehicle using natural gas that I use here in the United States. This is another case study where we did a net zero feasibility study, and this is for the Little Rock Air Force Base. Again, the goals were to actually define the net zero definition and then look at some of the challenges. So this was an aircraft hangar. So you actually have a lot of infiltration, which is actually a big concern in the heating season, as well as some other issues that go around a hangar. So this is very different. It's much more challenging to take a hangar to net zero and make it energy efficient versus a training facility, just by the nature of the program. This is probably difficult to read, but this matrice in general is an idea of how we describe to the client what their energy conservation measures would look like. And on the right column, we actually describe a green circle would represent yes, that we would recommend. The red circle would recommend no, we would not recommend. And in the middle would be a maybe. So on the left are the energy conservation measures that we looked at. So on the left is solar domestic hot water. We looked at solar thermal heating. We looked at solar PV array, daylighting, LED lighting. So all of these were given scrutiny. We gave them a a discounted payback period. We let them know what their annual energy cost savings would be. And we kind of gave them a roadmap going forward. So this next slide represents different systems, building systems. Looks like we have a lot of guests. And basically, this goes to U values and solar heat gain coefficient. So again, we ran an energy model and we looked at the different building systems and where they performed in the overall scheme of things. So this gave them a map on which building system. Again, as a percent of lead savings, another map that will give them more information. So we compared this to, and this, again, we're talking about the Little Rock Arkansas hangar. We compared current concept design to the proposed Netzero design. And again, we're looking at comparing different baselines to our goals of Netzero. We also looked at annual energy costs. A baseline, really, the baseline is something to compare your building to. So as you can see here, our Netzero proposed building consumed a lot less energy than the baseline. We looked at different PV locations. We looked at the roof, and then we also looked at the car canopy as well. So some of the lessons learned that went into this is for energy and renewable energy, the best use of your clients' dollars are really in this pyramid. And looking at the base of the pyramid, you go from passive to active technologies. So your passive technologies are really free. So a passive technology, for instance, could be as simple as elongating your building on the east-west axis. So you have maximization on the south and northern exposure. So technically, if you start considering that early enough in the design phase, that would not cost you any more to achieve. So that's where these passive strategies happen. Another passive strategy would be related to using a thicker wall construction or a thicker building material. So all of this, again, don't necessarily have to cost any more money, but they actually help you get to a more efficient building. The next level is to use energy efficient systems and equipment. So this is really where you're looking at high efficient lighting, you're looking at high efficiency HVAC units, and this is, again, your building systems need to be as efficient as possible, as well as insulation and your windows. So all of these are building systems that can be maximized after you do a passive design strategy. Once these strategies are implemented into the building, again, you can run an energy model to determine how energy efficient your building is. And then at that time, you begin to consider renewable energy technologies, such as solar, such as geothermal, and wind, and others. So the best use of the money, again, is to start with the passive strategies put it into your building systems, and then consider your renewable energy technologies. The reason why this is because your renewable energy is the most expensive product in the whole scheme of this equation. So they call this the net zero energy hierarchy, and this is really important in designing buildings and infrastructure, is to really consider all of this very early. So net zero design for passive measures, these are some of the takeaways that we found in designing these buildings and feasibility studies, is that in relationship to insulation, there's a point of diminishing returns. And so what that means is you can only add so much insulation before it maxes out on its return of R value or U value. Another one is limiting solar heat gain through high performance glazing or solar shading is really important. And where you want to do this is really on the outside of your building. So shading is really important. The third bullet point is your local climate is amenable to natural ventilation, and you should take advantage of that. So if you have natural ventilation, you should actually site your building accordingly and be able to have operable windows, so that can actually help ventilate your building naturally. Good daylight design is an iterative process, and modeling time should be allotted. So again, with the daylight and energy models, these should be iterative, means basically that you don't just do one daylight model or one energy model. You do them once, and then you do them again and again and again. So it's not just about compliance, but it's about a design, and that design is basically informed by both the architect and the engineer. So for net zero for designers, again, I was mentioning how buildings are a collaboration of both architects and designers. You need an integrated, coordinated approach. These disciplines should not be working in isolation. As I mentioned, you need to model this early and often, and design with a systems mentality. For renewables, you need to consider placement and orientation of renewables, and the power purchase agreement is a really popular mechanism for the DoD. Wind is very cost effective, but wind can only be used in certain regions where you have a high amount of wind. So it's not everywhere that you can use wind turbines. With that, I'm going to go ahead and take questions, and we'll also take a roll call on the different countries that we have. So I'll turn to Salim.
I'll turn it on.
Okay. So it looks like we have people from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Tunisia, Nigeria,
Djibouti.
and Djibouti.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for participating in today's call. A lot of these concepts that I'm describing to you are very Western. So, meaning we rely a lot on artificial means for daylighting and energy. I think in some of your countries, you actually are doing this traditionally. And so in the West, we're trying to do this through artificial means. So we have a question. Okay, good question. So how is the government facilitating the law enforcement? So I can actually shut mine down. I don't,
Yes.
right? So we
That
can
would
just go
work.
off of yours, right?
Sure.
Do I need to stop sharing to go back to yours? Oh, I do. Okay. So just hold on a second while I go through a technical. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, there I am. So, how is the government facilitating law enforcement? So, for government buildings, they are basically enforced through their own government process. So, as we do the projects that I just introduced today, we work closely with the government at the very beginning, in the middle, and all the way towards the end. And the federal mandates and executive orders that I mentioned to you are basically laws that the government needs to abide by. So when we do our drawings and specifications, the government actually looks at those drawings and specifications and makes sure that these energy efficient mechanisms are in place at that time. The other third party aspect of this is that a partner to the government can be a third party certification body. And in the US, we're using United States Green Building Council to do that. They also will be looking at these drawings, and we will get the project certified through that third party. So they become a partner of the government in getting the energy efficiency and sustainability measurements approved. So there is a certification at the end of that process, and the proof of certification of the plaque is really the proof of compliance for the government body.
We have another question.
Another question. They're also interested in learning how to push the government, how to integrate net zero energy into their policies. That's a good question. I think a lot of this is happening right now, and it's really through education. So I know, I've actually spent some time in Saudi Arabia and educated their government on energy efficiency, and some countries are further behind this conversation than others. But I think it's really by educating, so you can become active in your own country. You can look at different energy efficiency and sustainability communities in your country, in your region, and become active in your region. And you can begin giving talks like this and socializing the concept going forward. So that's probably the best, is to find a community of others who are interested in this and socialize this approach. I think that's probably the best place to start. You can also try and find buildings that have incorporated these policies and go and talk to those people and ask them how they incorporated these and create relationships. I think that's probably the biggest recommendation, is create relationships and educate.
Yeah, another one.
Another question is, do you have experience with the net zero building design in developing nations? Net zero building design in developing nations. We do have experience with energy efficiency in developing nations. we have not taken it to a net zero level yet. I know in the UK we have a number of case studies of net zero in energy design, but most of this conversation has really been centered on developed countries in Europe and in Scandinavia and North America. So the answer to your question is not yet, but I think these are the countries that need the most guidance because, like India and China, where you have a large population consuming resources at a rapid pace, these are really the countries that need energy efficiency the most. So, I mean, all of you really can become ambassadors and change agents in your own countries and to continue this dialogue in your developing nations.
Sorry. Greg, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Would you be able to share your experience working outside the US, your international experience related to sustainability? Maybe there's something we can learn from what you've done.
Absolutely. I mean, so my international experience is, I mentioned Saudi Arabia, so I spent at least 3 months developing a guidance program for Saudi Arabia through Saudi Aramco. So I visited Saudi Arabia and met with the officials there with Aramco, and we basically did a whole white paper on energy efficiency and sustainability as it related to existing and future building stock. And part of my task there, responsibility, was actually to develop incentive programs for energy efficiency. And there were awareness campaigns through the media. There were awareness campaigns through utility agencies. So there, again, we really were trying to bring awareness to energy efficiency because, I mean, I remember when I first met the folks at Aramco and I was telling them about all this great work on net zero. And they basically stopped me in my conversation and said, look, we're just trying to get people to turn their light off, when they leave the room, or their HVAC off when they leave for vacation. Mm-hmm. So there was, a big shift. I needed to meet them where they are. So it's all about kind of understanding where your client is at and then meeting them where they are.
Okay.
Mariama, can you still hear us?
Yes, very much.
Okay.
And
perfect.
I think there's another question, Salem. I don't know if you're able to see it. I think it's from Nazia, and she says, "What standards are followed for buildings which are supposed to be green?"
Okay. So it depends on the different standards vary depending on the client and the location and the country. So that the answer to that question is it really depends. Some, like for instance, in California, where I'm at right now, we have an energy efficient building code that's in place, and we have to abide by that building code. For the military in the U.S., they are mandated again on the federal mandates and executive orders, and they're required to get a LEED Silver minimum certification. So In other countries, it's going to depend on the jurisdiction, on the government, and it's also going to depend on the client. So it all depends where the client is and where the government is at a federal, state, and local level.
We have another question.
Okay. How have the energy efficiency projects gone so far? How receptive are the stakeholders? That's a really good question because overall it's gone, the energy efficiency effort, I think, has gone pretty well. We need to do more of it because of, I mean, for instance, you've probably heard about in California, we have a water shortage right now, so that we have a drought happening. So I think people in general, unfortunately, are a little reactive. So when gas prices are high, they'll think about energy efficiency more. If water prices are high, they'll think about them more as well. But in general, the projects have gone well. They've been well received and championed by our clients. And often what we'll do is a survey of the people who are occupying these energy efficiency buildings and ask them about their human comfort. And again, the response, I think, has been pretty good. So, you know, good energy efficient design now, the technology should be embedded into the building, and we've kind of gone from a building that looks energy efficient to a building that is energy efficient, but it's actually hidden. So these are hidden technologies. What are the challenges you face when trying to establish energy efficient on net zero projects? So there are actually a lot of different challenges on net zero projects. One of them, I think, is really just starting that process as early as possible. And it's all about also getting the team in place that knows how to do energy modeling and daylighting, and having the expertise on a team that knows and has been through the process before. So, and related to that is the cost, obviously, of going to net zero. The costs can actually be mitigated by starting early and starting with the right team. So that's really important. And probably the biggest challenge is just getting the right people on the right team aligned with the goals as early as possible. I think that is the biggest challenge. Everything else really should fall into place. Of course, it would all depend on your electricity demand and energy demand in your location, but really it's all about the team and the expertise coming to that project.
Another one.
Do you have experience in energy efficiency in Africa? If yes, indicate country and project. I honestly cannot think of a project that we have in Africa. And I mean, we do have 70,000 people,
Yes.
so it's difficult for me to have a grasp on what goes on globally, but I don't think we have yet to perform energy efficiency in Africa. So that is to be determined. I know we've done work in China, we've done work in India. I mentioned Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Morocco. So I guess
yes, that's
Africa. Africa,
yes,
right? So we are doing some work in Africa. In Morocco, we actually have a number of sustainable master plans. So we are working with Morocco right now on some master plans, and I guess we're working with the King of Morocco there for energy efficiency and sustainable master plans. So yeah, that is happening. And I mean, we could probably follow up between Salem and I to get you some case studies on that. Okay, so
There's another.
wow, lots of great questions. Thank you. How difficult is it to get funding in countries such as India and China um, and Morocco? Um, again, it that question would be the answer would be it basically depends on the client and the location and also incentives. So many countries and many governments at a local state level actually give incentives for energy efficiency. So, and then there are also grants for energy efficiency as well. So it all depends on a lot of this is client driven. So it depends on the priorities and the education and the evolution of the client coming to you and asking you for energy efficiency. So all of these energy conservation measures do have a return on investment, but it's all about how willing that client is you know willing to put an investment in upfront for a long-term return.
We have another one.
Okay. So question is, today I visited the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in India. Great. And the ministry's building is net zero energy multi-storied building with 100% on-site power generation. The whole roof is covered by solar panels. That is wonderful. So that's a great example of how the government is leading by example and show it can be done in their country. And I'm glad that you visited. And again, it goes back to you, each of you as change agents, visiting these buildings and understanding what went into it. And the fact that this happened in India is a great thing because it shows that it can be done and it'll serve as a case study for others.
No, I think we're good with questions.
Okay. I think that's all the questions. I have to say thank you for all the questions. Those are some really, really great questions.
Great. Do we have any last questions or comments from our listeners? We have a few minutes. We can definitely take one or two. And if not, then Greg, any last words?
Well, I'd like to thank everybody. This has been a really great opportunity for me being in front of your group, Adiyama, and just having an international audience. I honestly, this is the first presentation I've given where I've had so many intelligent questions. I'm always pleased to have questions and see the interest. So let's not stop here. Let's continue the relationship. And if you have more questions in the future or just want to reach out, Salim and I are at your disposal.
Great, Greg. Thank you so much. I think we had about, I've lost count, but I think we had about 9 people who were with us. And then I guess a couple of people had to drop out. A couple of people had to drop out because of technical reasons. And then some people were trying to join, but I think they had to leave. But I think it was a great start to this tradition, maybe, hopefully, of webinars in the ELP. And Greg and Salam, thank you so much for making this such a smooth and wonderful experience. I think we would all agree that this was a very riveting and enlightening presentation on a very interesting topic. And we were able to generate interesting discussion as well towards the end of the presentation. So I would like to thank all the alumni who joined us. And I would like to especially thank Salem. Salem is an ELP alum from last year, the ELP 2014, and she is also on the ELP Alumni Network Steering Committee. And she, in fact, works with Jacobs Engineering, and she facilitated ELP's interaction with Greg to do today's event. We have been recording this event, and we will share it with all the ELP alumni. And based on that, if you have any further questions, I hope, Greg, it's okay if they get in touch with you with any questions, or if they have any, they would like to be pointed to any resources that will be useful for them in their work. I hope that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Great. So thank you so much once again, everybody, and a special thanks to Anita, who's been doing all the background work in terms of troubleshooting and ensuring that all the messages are being answered. Thank you, Salem, for keeping track of the questions and facilitating the Q&A. And of course, Greg, for being there and answering all the questions. And in general, just thank you all for all your support. So with that, we wrap up the first ELP webinar, and we do hope that we can do some more of such events in the future. Thank you so much, and bye-bye. Have a great day in whichever part of the world you are. And as you know, we at the ELP will stay in touch through our different modes of communication. We have the newsletter coming up, in fact, for the summer. And in general, just to let you know, we are in the middle of preparations for the next ELP. I mean, I can't believe it's a year that's gone by so fast. I mean, a lot of you who've joined here were from last year's cohort, and I had the chance to meet all of you. And guys, we already have another cohort coming in very soon. So thank you so much, and we'll stay in touch and have a great day ahead of you.